I saved every dollar I could. I skipped lunches. I drove a car with a cracked windshield for 2 years. I wore the same 3 pairs of shoes until the soles wore thin. Every sacrifice had a purpose. Every denied pleasure was a deposit toward something I told no one about, not my parents, not my brother, and definitely not my sister-in-law, because I already knew what would happen if I did. I knew because I had watched it happen before. 4 years ago, I got a bonus at work. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to make a difference. Enough to cover 3 months of car payments. Enough to finally get ahead of something instead of always chasing from behind. I made the mistake of mentioning it at Sunday dinner, the way you do when you're still young enough to believe your family celebrates your wins with you. By the following Friday, my brother had borrowed $1,100 from me to cover what he called a temporary shortfall on his rent. By the Sunday after that, my mother had asked me to help cover my nephew's school supplies. By the end of the month, the bonus was gone, split between people who never once asked how I had earned it. That was the last time I mentioned money to anyone in my family. So when I started seriously saving for a place of my own, I kept my mouth shut. I opened a separate bank account at a credit union across town. Not the bank where my mother had been co-signer on my first checking account when I was 19. The one she sometimes still asked me about as if it were a joint account instead of mine. I set up automatic transfers the day after each paycheck. I stopped going out. I told my coworkers I was on a budget without explaining why. I told my family I was just getting by when they asked, which they rarely did unless they needed something. My name is Daniel. I'm 31 years old. I work in logistics management for a mid-sized distribution company outside of Columbus, Ohio. I am the younger of 2 sons, and for most of my life I operated as the invisible one, not the problem child, not the golden one, just the one who showed up, did what needed to be done, and was thanked with being asked to do more. My brother Marcus is 37. He has a wife named Gretchen and 2 kids, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the centerpiece of our family's attention. Not because he was exceptional at anything in particular, but because he was loud about what he needed, and my parents were never able to say no to him. When Marcus needed a co-signer for his first car, our father did it. When Marcus and Gretchen needed to move in somewhere while their apartment was being renovated, a renovation that turned into 14 months, they moved into my parents' house, and my mother redecorated the guest room to them. When Marcus lost his job in 2021 and needed help covering his mortgage, there was a family meeting about it, complete with a handwritten budget my mother put together, mapping out how everyone could contribute. I contributed $400 a month for 7 months. I was never asked. I was informed. I am not bitter about my brother. I want to be clear about that, because this story is not about hating him. I love him in the distant, complicated way. You love someone who has never once treated you as an equal. What I am is clear-eyed. I stopped expecting fairness from my family a long time ago, and somewhere in that letting go, I found something useful. The knowledge that the only person who was going to build my life was me. So I built it quietly. It took me 3 years and 4 months. I saved enough for a down payment on a 2-bedroom condo in a neighborhood I had been watching for 2 years, close enough to work to cut my commute in half, close enough to a park that I could walk there on weekends, far enough from my parents' house that dropping by unannounced would require actual effort. I went through the pre-approval process alone. I worked with a real estate agent I found through a coworker, a woman named Patricia, who was professional and efficient and never once made me feel like my budget was something to be embarrassed about. I toured 11 properties over 6 weeks. I put in 2 offers. The second one was accepted. I signed the closing documents on a Thursday afternoon in March. Patricia handed me the keys in the parking lot of the title company's office. I sat in my car for a few minutes before driving away, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wanted to hold the quiet for just a moment before anything else could touch it. I told no one. I had a plan for that too. I was going to wait until I had moved in, until the place was mine in every practical sense, and then I was going to tell my parents in a calm, matter-of-fact way, not asking for their opinion, not inviting suggestions, just informing them, the way you inform people of facts that don't require their input. I never got the chance to do it on my terms. I had taken 2 weeks off work to handle the move. I'd hired a small moving company and scheduled them for the Saturday after closing. On Friday, the day before the move, I drove to the condo alone to measure a few things and drop off some boxes I'd packed in advance. I parked in the lot, grabbed 2 boxes from my back seat, and walked to the entrance. I almost didn't notice anything wrong at first. The hallway looked normal. I took the elevator to the third floor. I walked to Unit 14. I set the boxes down to get my key out. And then I heard it. Music. Coming from inside my unit. Not loud, but unmistakable, the specific playlist my sister-in-law puts on when she's in a good mood. Something with acoustic guitar and light percussion that she plays every single time she cooks or cleans. I had heard it 100 times at family dinners. I knew it the way you know a ringtone that isn't yours, but belongs to someone you've spent too many hours around. I stood in the hallway outside my own front door and listened to my sister-in-law's music playing inside my condo. For a moment, I didn't move. I ran through every possible explanation, trying to find one that made sense. Patricia had a lockbox code from the showing period, but that had been disabled at closing. I had confirmed it. The building management had a master key, but they had no reason to be inside. I had not given anyone else a key. I had not told anyone this address. I took out my phone and pulled up the security camera app. I had installed 2 cameras 2 days after closing, one covering the front door, one in the main living area, exactly because I had learned, over years of living in my own life, that documentation is not paranoia, it is preparation. I opened the feed. My brother was sitting on the floor of my living room, eating chips from a bag, surrounded by what appeared to be folded laundry. His 2 kids were running between the hallway and the bedroom. My sister-in-law was in my kitchen. There were groceries on my counter. There was a jacket hanging on the hook I had installed by the door. There were shoes, 4 pairs of adult shoes, and 2 pairs of children's shoes, lined up against my wall like they belonged there. I stood in that hallway and looked at my phone for a very long time. Then I called my brother. He answered on the second ring, which told me he wasn't even nervous. "Hey," he said, easy and relaxed, like we were just catching up. "Where are you right now?" I said. A pause. "Not long. Just enough. I'm at your place, actually. Mom said you wouldn't mind if we stayed for a couple days while the contractors are working on." "Marcus." I stopped him there. "How did you get in?" "Mom had the address. She said you mentioned it to Dad, and I never mentioned it to Dad." Another pause. Longer this time. "Look, we can talk about this. It's just temporary. Gretchen needed somewhere quiet, and you know how the kids are with..." I hung up. I want to explain what happened next clearly, because it matters. I did not go inside. I did not knock on my own door. I did not confront my sister-in-law through a wall of music and denial while my brother's children watched. I walked back to the elevator, went down to my car, and sat there for 7 minutes while I thought through exactly what I needed to do. Then I called the non-emergency police line. I told the dispatcher that there were individuals in my property without my permission, that I was the owner of record, and that I had documentation. She took the address. She told me a unit would be by within 20 minutes. I thanked her, hung up, and called Patricia. Patricia answered immediately. I explained the situation in 2 sentences. She pulled up the closing documents on her end, confirmed what I already knew: the property had transferred to me fully at closing, no other parties on the title, no lease agreements, nothing, and told me she would email me the confirmation right then. It was in my inbox before the police arrived. 2 officers came, a man and a woman, both professional, both calm. I met them in the parking lot and showed them the title confirmation on my phone, my ID, and the closing paperwork I had photographed and saved in my files the day of signing. The female officer looked at everything carefully. Then she looked at me. "You want them removed?" "Yes," I said. We went up together. When I knocked on my own door, it was my sister-in-law who opened it. The expression on her face when she saw the 2 officers behind me shifted through 3 distinct phases in about 2 seconds: surprise, then forced calm, then something that looked almost like calculation. "Daniel," she said. "What is?" "This is my property," I said. "I need everyone out." She started to speak. The male officer stepped slightly forward and explained the situation in the measured, practiced tone that law enforcement uses when they want to be clear without escalating. He told her that I was the owner of record, that there was no lease or sublease in place, that they needed to gather their belongings and vacate. My brother appeared behind her. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before. Not anger, not embarrassment, but something that looked like genuine disbelief that it had come to this. Like I had done something wrong by not simply accepting it. "Daniel," he said, "this is family." "I know," I said. "This is also my home. Please take your things and go." It took 40 minutes. I stood in the hallway the entire time. The officers waited near the door. my nephew cried. My niece kept looking at me with wide, confused eyes, and that part was hard. She is 7 years old and had no part in any of this, and I felt for her even then. But I did not move. I did not apologize. I did not offer a compromise. When they were finally gone, I locked the door, sat down on the floor of my empty living room, and exhaled. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. By the following morning, my mother had called me 6 times. I answered on the 6th call because I knew from experience that not answering would only delay the conversation, not prevent it. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask for my side of things. She opened with the words, "How could you do that to your brother in front of his children?" I had prepared for this conversation in my head. I had gone through it enough times that I was able to stay level. I told her what happened factually. I owned the property. I had not given anyone access. I had arrived to find people in my home without my permission, and I had asked them to leave. I told her I had documentation of all of it. She told me that family does not document each other. I told her that family does not enter each other's homes without permission. She told me that Marcus was having a hard time and that she had hoped I would be understanding. I asked her how Marcus had gotten my address. She was quiet for a moment, and in that quiet, I understood she had found the closing documents. I had left a copy of them in a folder in my car during a Sunday dinner 2 weeks before closing, a dinner I had driven to from the title company's office. She had gone into my car to get the ketchup from the cooler I kept in the back seat. I had brought food to the dinner, as I always did, and she had seen the folder on the seat. She had opened it. She did not admit this directly, but she also did not deny it when I said it out loud. "You went through my things," I said. "It was sitting right there," she said. "I wasn't snooping. And then you gave my address to Marcus. I thought you would want your family to know where you were going to live. Without asking me. Daniel, you should have told us. We're your family." I want to describe what it feels like to have the word family used as a reason to accept having your boundaries crossed, your home invaded, and your privacy treated as something that belongs to everyone. It feels like a door being shut. Not a dramatic slam, just a quiet, final close. Something settling into place. "Mom," I said, "I need you to hear me. What happened at my condo was trespassing. I have camera footage, I have the police report, and I have documentation of the access. I am not pursuing anything right now, but I need Marcus and Gretchen to understand that they cannot come to my home without my invitation. And I need you to understand that my address, my finances, and my property are mine, and I will not be informing the family of those things going forward." She cried. I expected that. I stayed on the line until she calmed down, and then I said goodbye and ended the call. Then it spread. I am still not entirely sure of the sequence, but within a week, 3 of my cousins had reached out to me, 1 by text, 2 on Facebook expressing concern, asking what had happened, noting that they had heard I had kicked Marcus out in front of the kids. My aunt called my father. My father, who rarely involves himself in anything, sent me a text that read, "Your mother is very upset. I hope you will find it in your heart to work this out." At work, things became complicated in a different way. My brother does not work at my company, but one of my colleagues, a guy named Trevor, who plays in the same recreational softball league as Marcus, mentioned casually in the break room that he'd heard my brother was having some housing trouble. I looked at Trevor and I said, with complete calm, "That's not something I'm going to discuss at work." Trevor nodded, and that was the end of it, but I spent the next 2 weeks aware that my private life was circulating in spaces I couldn't control. Marcus, for his part, went silent for about 3 weeks. Then he texted me. The text was long. I will summarize it because the specific words are less important than the shape of it. He said he was sorry for the way things happened, but that he felt I had overreacted. He said the family was worried about me and felt like I was pulling away. He said he hoped I could find a way to move forward without holding on to anger. Nowhere in the text did he acknowledge that he had entered my home without permission. Nowhere did he say the word wrong. The closest he came was "I know it wasn't handled perfectly," which is the kind of sentence that distributes blame into the atmosphere without actually placing it anywhere. I read the text twice. I did not respond. What I did instead was consult with a lawyer. I want to be honest about why I did this. Not because I intended to sue my brother. The legal case would have been straightforward, but the outcome would not have been worth the cost in every sense of that word. I did it because I needed to understand exactly what my position was, and because I have learned that understanding your rights is not aggression, it is clarity. The lawyer I spoke with confirmed what I already knew. I had a clean paper trail. The closing documents were unambiguous. The police report was on file. The camera footage showed unauthorized occupancy. She told me that if I wanted to pursue a civil claim for trespassing and any damages to the property, I had sufficient grounds. She also told me that if any family member entered my property again, without explicit written permission, I could pursue a restraining order. I thanked her, paid for the consultation, and left with the one thing I had come for, the knowledge that I was standing on solid ground. I did not file anything. Not yet, but I kept everything. It has been 4 months since that Friday in the hallway. I moved in the following Saturday, as planned. The movers were professional and efficient. I assembled furniture over the weekend. I hung 2 pictures on the wall in the living room, photographs I had taken myself, framed at a shop downtown. I bought a coffee maker I had been looking at for 2 years, and made coffee in my own kitchen on a Sunday morning while the light came through windows that belonged to me. My parents and I are in a careful, reduced contact. I see them at major holidays. The conversations are civil and short. My mother still occasionally sends texts that are pointed in the way only mothers can manage, not outright accusatory, just weighted, full of implications about what kind of son I am. I respond politely and do not engage with the weight. Marcus and I have not spoken since his text. Gretchen sent me a message 3 weeks ago through Instagram, which I thought was interesting given that she has never directly messaged me before. It read, "I hope you know that this wasn't how I wanted things to go. The kids ask about you." I appreciated the sentiment. I also noticed it did not include an apology. I responded that I hoped the kids were well, and I left it there. What I want to say, what I actually want anyone listening to this to take away, is not about revenge. I did not do any of this to hurt my family. I did it because at some point you have to decide what the foundation of your life is going to be built on. I had been building on sand for 31 years. Every time I got somewhere, a wave came through, in the shape of a request, or a crisis, or an expectation, and I would find myself back at the same level, starting over. There was always a good reason. There was always something urgent. There was always the word family. I bought my home alone. I saved the money alone. I signed the documents alone. I stood in that hallway with 2 officers behind me and asked the people who had walked into the life I built without invitation to please leave, and I meant it, and I did not apologize for meaning it. I still drive past the park on weekends. I still make coffee on Sunday mornings. The crack in my old car's windshield is fixed now. I finally got to that, and sometimes I sit in the parking lot of my building and just look at it. Not with triumph, exactly. With something quieter than that, with the knowledge that what I built is mine, and that this time, I know how to protect it.